Welcome back to the Seraphine podcast. I am Seraphine Arocha, and I have my sidekick from hell, Tom Beaver. No, I have to
I'm
say,
your ally in the apocalypse.
you really are my ally in the apocalypse. It's funny because I don't have very many long-term male friends, but Tom has been my friend for, I don't know how many years. 15 years. And boy, when I talk to him, it is like I laugh, and we also like to poke at each other, but then we also know when to cool our jets, like my dad used to say, cool your jets. All right, so we're not going to cool our jets quite yet. We're going to go into the last kind of topic that I presented. So I'm lobbying back to you this whole concept of right before COVID, we just put a bomb in everything that kind of was where we were going in a trajectory. But we had Me Too, we had Black Lives Matter movements, we had social upheaval on top of LGBTQ crime. And then we had, what else did we have? We had a lot of stuff that just blew up right before. And then
those are the big ones.
It was and we had a president that was just lighting fires on top of the fires that were being set in Southern California and everywhere else. So then we go into...
I think, that's the one good thing about the pandemic is I honestly think that knocked him out.
Yes.
His handling of the pandemic is the only way we would have got rid of him.
That's actually a really good point. I think COVID really... it forced us into...
I shouldn't say that. We would have got rid of him one way or another eventually, but that helped. That expedited the process.
It was like the boot that shoved him out the door. I feel like COVID, though, and being isolated forced us into almost a meditative place, even if we aren't, harnessing our Gwyneth Paltrow and meditating every morning for 20 minutes. I think that it did force us to sit and think about, once we got outside of ourselves and our own problems, we actually had to think about other things because we had 24 hours in a day. Yeah. So we started to not only go, well, gosh, I don't know about my job and da-da-da. Then it's like, oh my God, what's the world going to be like? Yeah. So,
I don't think we've recovered from,
no,
by any means, the trauma of like the pandemic. How long did it last all time? I mean, you still got a Delta variant. You got all these things going on. Like,
we still have people we still have masks required in some parts of like businesses that are here in Kansas City.
And a scientist who wants to scare the shit out of you will tell you that's just part one. Uh-huh. There's going to be more of these in the future, more viral pandemics, epidemic viruses. Going to happen more and more in the future.
I have to say, for me, it was a profound change within myself, and it didn't help that I was confronted with illness in my family, that two creatures that I love, like my children, showed their age. I lost one. It didn't help that, I was in a place where I was having a come to Jesus about like my own life and then wanting to start up like a podcast, but not really understanding like what exactly I could talk about. Mm-hmm. And then, to add this weird kind of overlay is that my husband and I, we've worked really hard. Like we were grinders. We didn't come from a lot of money, and we actually figured out things in this last year in a way that I feel stronger with him in a relationship. Financially, we're in a good place. And it was so hard to come into a renaissance in my relationship and again, create something like this podcast and then have all this harsh sadness around me and then experiencing loss of people that I love and or people struggling and not understanding like how do you exist?
Well, there's nothing like being told you can't leave your house, to force you into self-reflection and to deal with things that you're not, that you weren't dealing with, or you thought you weren't dealing with. And people say, you can't leave your home, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't go anywhere. So now you have to sit there and stare at the walls if you're alone, or stare at your mate, or stare at your family, or whatever it is, and you're forced to be in a position where you have to deal with these things. That's interesting. It's a shame that that's how it is, though. No. It's like you have to be forced to do it. But it sounds like that's what you're saying, like you were put in a position where you really had to reconcile some of these things in a manner that wasn't planned and certainly unforeseen. Yeah, nobody can predict when the pandemics are coming.
So true. And the other thing is really being confronted with like being in the depths of sadness.
Yeah, a lot of people got terminally depressed. Yeah, there were suicides, and I was just reading that in the Atlantic Monthly a few days ago. I didn't even think, for some reason, my mind didn't even go there. I was like, yeah, everybody's lonely, everybody's depressed, everybody wants to go out and do shit and spend money, and we want life to go back to normal. But it never occurred to me that people would get so bad that they would kill themselves. And that was, I was reading this article about how some of the suicide rates went up in certain regions during the pandemic.
It was wild because,
probably not Beverly Hills.
No, no. But I do.
Certain places.
I do think, though, the things that changed about me was I was very conscious of the people in my life that were on their own. And because
you're lucky if you have somebody
totally
around.
Every night in bed, I turned to Johnny and I was like, I don't know how I could manage sitting with myself like this and being confronted with all these emotions if I didn't have you as a buffer. Because on the days where I hit the well of sadness, he would be like my coach. And on days where he would be like, because he was in a unique position because his job required him to be working and to be, right there. And it was so strange because here he was every day on the front lines, and here I was, doing yoga classes on, Instagram and trying to think about what to do with my time. And then it was like, thank God for the podcast, because it allowed me to kind of talk through some things and also allow, some people that, that otherwise would be doing the same thing, just sitting and staring at the walls and then having some conversations. Mm-hmm. And we had awkward moments because, there were times people, were wearing masks in my home. And then there were people who were like, well, I'm on film. Do I wear a mask? Do I not? And all of those social protocols. And the other thing is we were all dealing with all of the other things. Especially with George Floyd, and then trying to dabble in having these tough conversations.
It's interesting to think about what are the positive things that came out of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I noticed was, I'm sure everybody noticed this, is the monolithic capitalist, whatever you want to call it, machine got scared and wanted to rush everybody back to work. Yeah. We got to get the economy going again. We got to get everything going. Trump was pushing everything in that direction. All of you are going to die and get a virus. Tough shit. Yeah. Everybody go back to work. We got to start buying things again. That's interesting because that exposed a lot of the impetus of American culture or whatever, which is just to go out and make money at any cost, even if it means, we're going to lose. You're
going to put yourself at risk.
You're going to put yourself and your family at risk. That to me is very positive. It was like a big glaring example of where our values lie. Yeah. Not everybody's staying at home and, take care of each other. There was that going on in certain regards, but you had the government telling you, get out there and do your thing. You even had a president that was telling you that it's a hoax. I don't even know if this virus is actually
the China virus.
The China virus, trying to blame. He likes to blame everything on China. Then he got the virus. Yeah. Or so we were told. Yeah. He acted like he had the virus and set up a camera and sometimes I wonder about that stuff.
No, I get it. I think it was so bizarre too, because there were certain places, I've lived kind of all over the United States, and it was so interesting because there was a few places, that I either had friends in, or we took road trips to Colorado, and because we were getting so stir crazy, we just wanted to be in fresh air and nature, but then also seeing like how different states, different people, like Florida, total crap show. I mean, like
different states handling it differently.
Totally handling it, like to a point to where, I never knew that I would feel uncomfortable, but I definitely had some moments where, I was in certain areas or certain businesses and then going like second guessing myself, like, wait a second, like these people don't have masks on.
Yeah.
Like I'm paranoid.
And if you tell them to put a mask on, they'll be like, what the?
Totally.
What are you don't tell me what to do.
And then the weirdest part is this transition. Even now, we were in New York for 4th of July, and just really feeling this dance of like, again, I'm vaccinated. I feel good, but I had COVID, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy, let alone someone who was vulnerable or health compromised.
As far as I know, I never got it.
Yeah.
I was worried at the beginning. I thought my girlfriend she had a cough for like a few weeks, but nobody I know, other than you actually, nobody I know, close friends got it.
Yeah. And it was hard because I had to isolate from my husband due to his profession.
Yeah.
To a point where literally, like, he couldn't even.
I remember I talked to you during that period.
I thought I was going to go crazy, and I don't know. I guess now, as we're talking about this, I feel so. I've never felt more definitive, and I haven't had more opinions that are strong. I'm not on the fence about a lot of things anymore.
That's good. We don't need people to be on the fence right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not where we're at. We're not at a place where people need to be riding the fence. People need to start making some bold strokes and decisions. And there's going to be pushback from the people who think you're wrong, but, it sounds cheesy.
And honestly, I have to say, it felt great. It felt like a load off my shoulders, especially in the conversations I had regarding racism, to learn and to be like.
I was going to say, what felt great?
Yeah, it felt, honestly, I was scared that I was going to, be humiliated or
accidentally put your foot in your mouth.
Yeah, and I did. I had some uncomfortable moments. I mean, one of my dear friends, Dr. Auburn, who I've had on the podcast, who is a scholar. I mean, she is someone who has studied racism and how to implement it into our curriculums and how to take it out, to start to learn about bringing more Black culture, Black experience within our school programs. And I had a few moments with her, not so much on camera, because she's so kind and she is an educator. But we definitely had a few moments as friends to where the humiliation, the humility within me, saying to her, like, you have been so gracious being my educator, doing this and holding space for me, because you don't have to, but because she's chosen to be an educator, she told me, she's like, I'll take a little bit of the pressure off, but she's like, if I can see that you're not doing it to your other African American friends or Black friends, these are the things where, I'm glad that I'm helping correct something within you.
Sometimes I feel like racism, sexism, and all these isms that we talk about all the time are just like, they're like the legs of a table, and they're holding this table up. But the actual table consists of this one big giant ism that nobody ever talks about. It is the thing that shall not be uttered in mass media, and that's classism.
100%.
That's what it's always like that. It's all, but nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants, because it's easier to talk about all these things. Like racism has been around forever.
Yeah.
I think we're chipping away at it. Sexism been around forever, but we're chipping away at it, which is fantastic. I don't know if I would say that I think it's ever going to go away. As long as human beings walk this planet, I don't know if it's ever going to go away, but I do think it's getting better. But the one thing that I always think can get better, if everybody was to be proactive and get pissed off, is classism. People, I mean, there's always going to be the poor and the middle and the rich.
I agree. I feel
the
like
the middle seems to be disintegrating.
Yeah, well,
because of the equality gap. It's like they just want to have a culture of just super poor people and super wealthy people. But that's to me, that's the issue that's always like, it's the umbrella issue that people don't like to address. Again, it's like global warming. It's so massive and people don't know what to do. What are you going to do about mass inequality?
100%.
How do you
combat
it?
And again, you can't, certain communities going into the community and trying to give the power back, but then unfortunately the people who have a lot of the power, especially in this country, are still white people, but they go into these communities to try to help. It's like, well, we don't want you to help with the problem.
Yeah.
So then it's this mixture of like, well, how do we have conversations? How do we take the back seat and allow the people within these communities to take the forefront to educate the people within the communities?
Yeah. It's very difficult to get everyone on the same page about any issue.
100%.
Any issue.
And to give up power in general. There is a fear. There is a fear. And a lot of people feel like they have earned their place at the table. And to sit there and just give their seat up, because it's the right thing to do, you watch people freak out. And it's about dismantling the bomb of what the right thing is to do. When we talk about do the right thing, I think first of all about that movie, but I also think about when we have the conversation of the why, and not just because it's the right thing to do, or to simplify it in this umbrella. It's about having these conversations face to face, and not having all these hashtags and
what do they call it? Slacktivism? Is that the new term for it?
Right?
Slacktivism. Yeah, the bumper stickers that I see in Austin, and or signs, and it's like, no, it's going to take a little more than that.
But honestly, what is your hope for moving forward, and what do you think? What do you think's gonna? What do you think we're gonna see?
Although one may listen to what we've been talking about, if they didn't go off to do something they thought was more important, if they listen to all this, I probably sound like a pessimist or a dark guy, but I'm not by any stretch of the imagination. And I do have tremendous faith in people and their ability to actually innovate and come up with new institutions, new ways of doing things. I couldn't think any other way.
Yeah.
It's too dark of a place to go to. So I do think that in the future, unfortunately, we may be forced to come up with some of these methods and whatever you want to call it, mechanisms, whether it's technology or whatever it is, to deal with some of these things that I know are coming down the pipeline in the next 25 years. I mean, it's like that book I was talking about, The Uninhabitable. And these things are coming down the pipeline. People don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it, but it's coming. So you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with those things. And people, who's going to build it? I mean, people are going to have to build it. And I do think that they can, but you just got to get everybody on the same page. You got to get everybody. And right now, that's the biggest problem in this country.
Yeah.
Everyone's fighting about, some menial issues, some of them not so menial, but the important thing, right, is to keep everybody fighting. As long as everybody's carved up into their little groups and pissed off about everything, you can't accomplish a goddamn thing.
It's so true.
Which is what our last degenerate president was so good at.
Yeah.
For carving everybody up and getting them involved in a bunch of trivialities and banalities, so that they can't keep their eye on the ball, the big issues.
So, any thoughts about the future?
For me,
just in general, like
I would say, what did Harvey Milk say? Remember when Sean Penn played Harvey? He said you got to give him hope, right? You got to give him hope. At the end of the day, you got to give him hope. I do have hope. I think that, now I'm not going to rush out and have 8 kids.
No, nor am I. But I'm going to have more dogs.
Right. But I do think there's hope for the future, and I think that people are going to I think you're going to have to push their back against the wall, unfortunately. It's not something that's going to happen organically. You're going to have to shove their back against the wall, and there'll be some legitimate terror, and then we'll be like, oh, we got to do something. We got to scramble around and do something, and then you will see it happen. Classically, that's what happens in cultures anyway. Yeah. When the shit hits the fan, everybody's like, now we have to figure out how to do not to go on a rant, but it's like the sewage in ancient Rome. Finally, everybody had to come together and figure out a way to address the issue.
I feel like this year for me has been a real weighing out how to be realistic, and not. I was always a really good storyteller. I was really good about telling people something and leaving out the bad parts, and justifying the fact that by leaving out the bad parts, I was allowing hope, to happen. I think that you really have to speak the truth, but insert hope. And I think that's where I'm trying to go forward, and that's what I'm trying to communicate. There are moments when I love to be unrealistic, and I love to be the girl who loved the never-ending story and dream about Falkor the dragon, taking me into, the sunlight of whatever. But, the harsh reality is that you do have to have an opinion, and sometimes you're wrong, but at least you're learning. And then the moments that you're right, sometimes you don't want to be right. It doesn't always feel so great to be right.
It's like one of my favorite quotes is, a life without despair is a life without hope.
Yeah.
And also George Orwell has a quote that I think addresses almost everything we've talked about. He said, on the whole, human beings want to be good, but not too good, and not quite all the time. Every time I think about that quote, I'm like, he just nailed it.
Yeah.
He nailed it. That's every problem in the world, pretty much in a nutshell, because most of the problems in the world are created by people.
Yeah. Well, I have to say,
your dog doesn't cause any problems.
No, he doesn't. Actually, dogs.
He's not contributing to global warming, or.
If you're having, I'm telling you now, if you feel like you're losing hope, get yourself a dog. They are unconditional love, the personification of it. No human can give unconditional love, but this guy here, ooh, I love you, dude. And I have to say, these episodes are dedicated to my sweet chunky monkey. We will put his picture up on this. This dog, he was my hope, and he also is the person who, reminded me that this life isn't permanent, and you got to enjoy. You got to enjoy all of it, even the moments where you're fallen from grace. You've got to take a moment to feel it. We're going to keep hanging on. I hope you guys will hang on and keep watching the Seraphine podcast. Please click the like button, subscribe. Tom Beaver is a great filmmaker. He's going to be making more films. He is somebody who I respect and is somebody who I know I will have in my very old age as a friend. Thank you for these conversations. And even if no one listens to it, I'm so glad, except for Aaron. Aaron's like, and I got to suffer